So this is a time of year when people travel a lot or have traveled a lot, and I love to travel. And I admit I'm a bit bougie about my traveling and how I get someplace. I mean, I'm fiercely loyal to one airline, to Delta, because that loyalty leads to the perks of upgraded seats and better snacks and access to the Sky Club. And it takes out most of the aggravation of traveling. And at this stage of life, it doesn't matter if I'm going to Paris or Peoria. I want to feel as good as possible when I get there and maybe a little bit pampered along the way. We try to provide a similar experience as we keep climbing on the back nine. Dennis, I know.
You know, I agree, man.
Yes.
I'm like, you got me into Delta, and I'm like trying to figure out how much money I can spend by the end of the year to get to Diamond. Like, I don't know. I'm trying to look at their like travel clubs and everything else because I'm platinum and I want to get to Diamond. So you know how much Rebecca makes fun of me. And then when we travel together, she doesn't have the status. So the problem is you revert to your guest status unless you want to sit by yourself. Sometimes they'll upgrade you together, but
Usually that's not. No, if you're at platinum and you book together. No, that's how it works for me.
It doesn't work.
You're
like
not
that
on
for
the
me.
right. You're not on the right program then, because that's what happens with me.
All right. Well, whatever.
The Sky Club is extra. They don't get to come in with
extra. Yeah. But it is definitely bougie, and I definitely do not like to fly any other airlines. I tried to fly JetBlue, and JetBlue's okay. I mean, of those other airlines, they're okay. But yeah. And then you start messing with like Spirit and some of those, and it's.
So I flew Spirit to the wedding.
Yes.
And it was fine. It was a direct flight.
2 hours, you're fine. Yeah.
2.5 hours. The seats, it was like sitting on a brick. Otherwise, it was just fine.
Did you see the congressional hearing with the guy from Spirit and the guy from...
I read about it. I didn't see it.
It was absolutely mind-boggling what was coming out of their mouths. Like they were so blatantly like, we're all about how much money we make. We do not care about the customer experience. Like Spirit was so... And Frontier, they were both like getting lambasted by Congress. And it was hilarious how they were just... They couldn't even speak without so obviously being like, we don't really care. We're all about trying to make money.
The one exception to that, and I'm sure Delta is the same way. I do know that they do a really good job of customer service. I've told the story on the podcast. At all.
Like, I think we're talking about two different things. When I say Spirit, I'm not even comparing them to Delta. Delta does do an amazing job with customer service. They screw something up, they fix it, they make it right. Every airline put you up in a hotel.
Right, every airline has a bad day. The delays out of their control, all those things.
All of it.
Yeah. When I was younger, I didn't care so much, right? I was trying to probably fly as inexpensively as possible. It was more about the destination. But now, I want to be, it's silly. When they say, Mr. Mora, thank you for flying with us today. I like that. It's dumb, but I do. Yeah. I don't want to just be a number, That's
like the ultimate back nine right there. That
yes.
You're like Mr. Mora.
Yeah.
Like you're 100 years old.
So we have today with us, Dennis, a guest who is very much on the front nine. Is that I want, and he travels a lot. So I have to ask him about that, but it's Keyen Lage, and Keyen is a really interesting character because, and what you've done, Keyen. So we're thrilled that you're here with us.
Yeah. Thanks for joining us.
This is a former NFL football player with a very interesting story about that and how, and where he is now as people are calling him the next Tony Robbins at 30 years old. Is that how old you are? Yeah. And so we're going to get into all of those things, but I have to ask you about traveling. Are you like me? Are you tougher than I am when it comes?
Are you bougie
like me when it comes to flying?
Well, you know what? I'm all about playing the points game.
Yes.
So like the Amex points, Capital One points, like I'm all about that and maximizing that. So I find great deals for first class flights, especially internationally, that I love to be able to take advantage of. So when I can, I do. But it does give me a little bit of nostalgia taking a really shitty flight, basically like a really bad one. Mm-hmm. Because when I used to fly, it would be just whatever I could get. So it kind of brings back a little bit of like a rugged feeling that feels kind of exciting about it.
You're slumming it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It was, especially like when you have a little bit of luxury, going back to the times when you didn't have it and like being in that, but not needing to have to be in it.
Right.
Can be kind of fun for me at least.
Yeah. So I need it now. I admit that readily.
Yeah. Well, great to have you. Your story is incredible. I mean, all of us would love to have played professional sports or had a cup of coffee. You literally were so close. It was your lifelong dream. Take us through just a little bit about what happened and why that dream did not come to fruition.
Yeah. So I got all the way there. It was literally in my grasp. And just as quickly as I thought I'd finally made it, I was told I'd never be able to play again. So I went undrafted by Kansas City, got picked up by Kansas City, ended up getting cut due to a numbers issue, didn't have enough linebackers, or they had too many linebackers on the roster, so I didn't have a spot. They told me I was the first guy up. We assumed they were being honest when they said that, my agent and I, and it turns out they were. But nevertheless, I went to New Orleans the following week and ended up tearing my ACL when I was there. The goal was to have it as rehabbed as possible, so if Kansas City did call again, I'd be able to play. Kansas City did call. My knee was good enough to at least pass a physical, and then they had me take a couple MRIs for precautionary reasons for issues I had in college, and one of them was my neck. One of them was my hamstring, and I found out that a neck injury that I sustained much earlier in my life was much worse than I thought, and they told me I was at a risk factor of 3.5 out of 4 to get paralyzed if I would have played.
Wow.
So at that moment, just as quickly as I thought I'd finally made it, I had my big break, I was told I'd never be able to play again.
So that was your kind of a pivot moment for you. How did you deal with that in the moment?
Well, I bawled my eyes out. I cried for sure. It was very confusing because, like I said, I thought this was the moment. I finally did it. All the time, effort, and energy I put in, this was here. But ironically, this is the part that a lot of people find very interesting is after I'd allow myself just to process through the emotion that I was initially feeling, I went and got a bite to eat by myself. I was at a little barbecue spot in Kansas City. I was flying out the next morning, and I just ordered whatever I wanted. And there was an odd feeling of relief associated with it. It really made me realize how much pressure I'd put on myself in the entirety of the process to get there and how stringent I was and the things that I did and how I went about things. And so there was a little bit of relief that I noticed, which was odd. And that feeling is ultimately what gave me a little bit of the permission to move into the next phase of life. Because I thought it was very odd to experience that feeling of relief.
Yeah.
We're going to go with our sunglasses since you have yours on.
Yeah, and you're way cooler
you're way
than we
younger,
are.
way cooler and way
Look
younger
great.
than us. So we're gonna try to fit in there. So take us through how you figured out the next part of your journey.
So I was a finance major in college, and the backup plan was always to be a financial planner. When that became a reality, or at least the possibility of it being a reality, I was like, there's no way I'm going to do this. Not a chance. So I don't have the story of doing a 9 to 5 and then doing what I really love. There was something in me that just said, I can't not do what I love. And so I decided just to ride my bike to the library every day after deciding I was not going to be a financial planner. And for about a month straight, rode my bike to the library from my parents' house and just read book after book after book as much as I could for like 8 hours a day with not really any strong intention other than just to learn more about different things I was excited about separate from football. And one book in particular I got recommended to by a mentor of mine while I was playing. It was called The Biology of Belief by a guy named Bruce Lipton. And he talks about how you can create your reality through manipulating your mind and manipulating your thoughts and ultimately change your biology, right? The chemistry of your biology through your thoughts. And I was like, this is fascinating. I'm like, I've practiced some of this throughout the course of getting to the NFL, but I got obsessed with learning about it. And I'm like, well, what I want to do is teach other people this information that I'm learning while living this way that I'm learning how to live the best life possible simultaneously. And so I knew a lot about the physical body. So I got my personal training certification. I knew that was a way for me to be able to spread this information that I had with skills I already had, and did that for about 4 months where I was from in South Dakota, then realized I needed to get out, moved to Miami, got a job at Equinox. And after a bit of being there, I realized that the physical body wasn't as exciting to me anymore, and I wanted to go deeper into the internal health side of things. So anything related to autoimmune conditions, digestive disorders, inflammatory disorders, I got obsessed about learning about those types of disorders. And I created a protocol for people with different autoimmune conditions and quit my job at Equinox and went all in on that. I was super excited about that and passionate about that, and created a program for people where I went fully online. I then moved to South America with a couple friends. They just started their businesses as well, where we were location independent. And after a while, I got a bit bored of dealing with just the internal health side of things as far as the physical element. And I found that most of the people that had something that they were dealing with physically, they had something emotionally they hadn't actively processed through and dealt with.
Yeah.
And so I knew this was my chance to finally go all in on what I really love the most, which is the psychology and emotional element of humans and how we function. And I transferred a lot of my nutrition clients into mental emotional clients and found that the results they were getting were sped up, but also sustained over an extended period of time, not just momentarily. And that's when I just went all in. And so for the last 6-7 years, I've been only focusing on the mental emotional side of people and helping them get whatever it is that they want. People call me the genie because I grant people's wishes. And I work with different people in different seasons. And my biggest thing is The potency of my medicine always comes down to my ability to stay up to speed with what I'm inspired to do and who I'm inspired to do it with. So who I'm working with always changes in different seasons, but that's how I keep operating at such a high level. And that's how I have as many different testimonials as I have. I think more than anybody. I think I have like over 70 videos or something on my website, people talking about me, of all different types of people. But it's because whoever I'm inspired to work with, those people just show up in my reality. That's pretty cool how that works.
What it sounds like you're talking about, if I could maybe boil it down to its essence, is transformation and self-transformation and kind of a 360-degree view of that, right? Starting with the physical, moving into the internal physical, moving into mental and emotional.
Yes.
So what does that mean to you? Am I putting the right phrase to it? And if so, or if not, what are the fundamental tenets of what it is that you're teaching to these various clients of yours?
Yeah, you explained that perfectly. And it's interesting. I see a lot of people that end up getting into the personal training space. The ones that continue to keep up with their own evolution always realize that, okay, the physical element of it externally isn't the answer. Okay, well, now we go to the internal side of it where I'm dealing with more of my internal physical world. That's not the answer. And then you go to the mental emotional side of it. That's not the answer. And I think you keep ascending as you grow in your own ability to exist beyond survival. And that's financially, physically, with just your health, relationship wise. You keep going up and up and up as far as what you realize as far as the answer for what you need to know as you advance further in life. So I love the way that you said that. My main goal with people is to connect them deeper with themselves. And a lot of those actions that I took and the process I took allowed me to connect deeper with myself, right? The external physical part, the internal physical part, my mental, emotional, and then ultimately the spiritual, I think, is, as you continue to move through, is what you then attempt to master. But yeah, I connect people with themselves and help them get to a point where they're living from a place of congruence within themselves. And ultimately, I think that's one of the greatest gifts that we can give to our health and our mental, emotional health in general, is the ability to live in congruence with who we actually are.
What's extraordinary about that is we have had this a lot on our show, but the transformation in people's mind comes when they get to the back nine, when they have a health issue, when they have something later in life. When we were at your age, this was not a common thing to talk about, right? 20, 30 years ago.
Yes.
It is so fascinating to me, not to just like focus on your age, that you are so mature to be in this space. You did have a health issue, but you didn't have, like, that I know of, you didn't have like cancer or something hit you on the front nine that made you do this. This is all something that was within you. When the rest of us, usually, we've had a lot of other things happen to us to get to this point. Because I feel like a lot of things you're saying we've talked about that are important on the back nine. And again, how did you get to this so early?
Well, I truly believe that I've always done what I want to do. And I'm very connected with my internal world as far as what I'm excited about and curious about. And I've always just continually followed what I've been excited and curious about. And so I don't know if I could give you much more of an answer outside of that.
That's great.
But because I never learned that I couldn't do what I truly want to do, because I thank my parents so much. They always encouraged me to follow what it was that I wanted to do. They never pushed me to football. I was in third grade doing push-ups by myself, waking up by myself without them doing anything. So they always just encouraged me to follow whatever it is that I really desired. And so I had that implemented in my mind at a young age. And so when I had the success I did with getting to the NFL, even though I didn't play, I still psychologically knew that, hey, when I commit to what I really want to do, good things happen. And so because I never really had that programming implemented in my mind of I couldn't do what I fully feel curious about or inspired to do, that really was the catalyst for me just to continue after football got done into that state.
Your parents deserve a lot of credit. We talk about start at yes. Most of us start at no, because our parents, our whole lives, or people we grow up, our mentors, some people around us say, no, 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 no. And I've said, we talked about this on the show too, start at yes, why you can do things, not why you can't. You're right. Most of us are programmed to why we can't do stuff.
Absolutely. And I think what the no does is it almost like that no tells that little excited, curious part of you, like the child element of yourself, that it's not safe to explore. And I think within most of us, that desire to explore it's so real, but for so many people, that child gets shut down so much that it just shuts up. And then the parent forms in a very unhealthy way where it's parenting that child, but it's not from a place of being able to parent the child to get the child what it wants, but to tell the child what it should want based off of whatever it was taught was a priority. by the mentors or parents in their life.
Yeah, and from fear, right? The parents are afraid the child is going to get
Correct.
hurt or injured
or become
or
there's a lot of dads
Right.
that come down on their kids because they see their kid that's being more powerful than they are, which is really odd. I think as a dad, you'd want that.
Yeah, I think
you did a good job.
both do. Yeah, for
Right,
sure.
for sure.
With your audience, how do people our age receive, how do you find that people our age receive it from somebody who is in their 30s, their early 30s? And how do people who are your age or a little younger, are they ready for this kind of discussion? My sense is that more than we were at that same age, the Gen Zers or the millennials, the more millennials, I suppose, are more receptive to it than Gen Xers were.
Absolutely. And it's ironic you say that because I had my oldest client. He was 73, 74, Canadian guy, just an absolute stud of a human being. And he was incredibly open and receptive after we had our first call. He got recommended to me by someone who was also a younger guy. And after our first call, I just called out just basically everything that he was experiencing, that he had going on. And then he was a believer. And normally that's what it takes, because I don't blame people. Like, I'm a young, good looking guy that you probably wouldn't expect to have this level of depth or understanding about the psyche. And I'm not naive to think that like they should automatically think that about me. So I've been confronting that for a long time, and I expect people to doubt me, and that's fine. I don't take it personally. I would probably doubt me too, honestly. So yeah, Gen Zers are definitely generally more open to it, but their issue is being able to be a little bit more rough and tough and taking things on and handling them. So they're more apt to want to do a little bit more of like the passive work, and then be less apt to take on more of like the physical moving forward type of work. So yeah, you have your positives and negatives with both age demographics, but anybody that's at an older age, is willing to confront the deeper parts of them that are disconnected from themselves, I think is so cool. And I want to applaud that and help as much as I can for someone that's willing to do that. Because, the older you get, the more solidified you become in your patterns and beliefs. And for someone that's, that age, like, he was such a legend to be able to step in that space with me and be willing to do that. And he crushed it too. Like, his relationship with his wife after being married for 40 years shifted and changed because he was willing to be able to do that. I mean, that's a long time to be in a relationship. Mm-hmm. That's a long time solidifying patterns in both of you. So it was pretty cool to see.
How do you get your clients? Like, where are you finding them? What, are you all over the board age wise? Like, how do they come to you?
I'm basically referral based. I do some stuff on social media, but I just share whatever I want. I don't run social media in a way where I'm like obligated to share anything. I just share whatever I want. Mm-hmm. And so I choose to live from this place of a little bit more, when I follow my inspiration or act upon what I feel is right, what I want just happens. Like, when I do what I feel like is right, I make more money, even when I do something that inherently the average person wouldn't think would make me more money. For example, I cut all my clients off once a year, where I say, I'm done. I'm not working with anybody. And I go and explore somewhere. And most people would see that, because normally I'm at the top of my game too when I do that. They're like, why would you do that? You've got so much momentum. That's not good to do. But I have such a different perspective of how things work. Like, I don't exist within the realm of like the 3-dimensional plane of if I do X, then I get Y. Like, I exist beyond that. I say, when I do X that feels inspiring to me, Y will somehow just inevitably happen. So it's a world that exists beyond the cause and effect mentally. It exists much further beyond that. And every time I've done that, I have so much practice for the last 5 years. I made more money every year by being less intentional as time's gone on about intentionally doing things to get clients. So I understand also you have to be at a certain level of operating to do that. But yeah, I get clients through referrals and people who find me through social media. But outside of that, I literally live my life in a way where I don't intentionally attempt to do any business. It just happens when I commit to what I want.
That approach is reflective of someone who's operating at a very high vibration. And sitting here in this room with you, I feel that high vibration. I mean, I can feel it coming off. But practically, maybe it's not a but, separate, yes. Practically, it feels to me like the field of executive coaching and this kind of wellness coaching is pretty crowded. How have you been able to break in? What is unique? You're saying some really interesting things, but what's unique about it that made it stand out, that allowed you to have this incursion to get traction?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think as the space has gotten really crowded, you have to find a way to stand out. And that's not just the way you live your life, but also in the actual container. Or like, what is the experience like in the container when someone's in there with you? When I say container, I mean like the space that we're intimately having when me and someone else are going in on them. And so I believe like I'm the genie in that space, right? That's my alter ego when I'm in that space. And that's how I market myself. And I think that's a big, exciting component of me that people are like, oh, that's interesting. That's unique. That's different. And I encourage any coaches that come to me that want to get a leg up in this industry. And even in general, like you have to have something that's very unique about you, some kind of alter ego that, you know, Kobe Bryant had the Mamba,
Right.
Beyonce, Sasha Fierce, right? Like every person should have some element to that alter ego that they can present to the world that people are like, huh, that's very interesting. So that's one thing. The second is the way that I've lived my life post football. It's like a journey nobody else has ever experienced, right? Like 3 months ago, I was in Russia and got taken into jail for questioning. Like when I was 24, I was a stripper for 3 months, right? Like I've done all different crazy, wild things that most people would be like, that's insane. I can't believe you do that. So you have to find something that massively differentiates yourself from everybody else. And so, yeah, I do what I feel like is inspiring, but I also know on the back end that by me continually doing things that are separate from what everybody else is doing, my marketability goes up and my value goes up because I'm gaining a perspective that nobody else has.
Wait, I can't let that slide by though. Tell me what were you pulled into questioning in Russia for?
Yeah, so I was in the mountains of Dagestan. Like I wanted to go to Dagestan because obviously like all the best fighters generally come from there. And I wanted to understand what was so special about that place that made these fighters so incredible. And so I met a guy there who had spent a decent amount of time deep in the mountains, because that's where most of them are from, deep in the mountains, even though they live in a city area generally now. But I went about 6 hours into the mountains with this guy where there was no electricity. It was all outhouses, candles, but the meat was, oh my gosh, so good out there. But anyway, we were coming out from the mountains and there was a mandatory national checkpoint where people were just getting randomly pulled over. I didn't have my passport on me. And apparently it's an absolute rule that you need to have your passport on you. And so they took my ID, my driver's license, and went into the station and made us sit there, my buddy and I, for like an hour. And he's like, dude, like, are you nervous? Because he was a Russian guy. He's like, you should be like nervous right now. And I was like, no, I'm not at all. He's like, how are you not nervous right now? I was like, well, I'd already emotionally processed the likelihood of this happening prior to me coming here. Like, I'm like, there's a high probability of me at least some point getting taken in for questioning, if not jail. I was like, I know I'm not going to die. So I'm willing and open to go to jail and do whatever happens there. You know, like I'm down for that. And so I'd already processed that. So I was already okay with the worst possible case happening. So it didn't matter to me. I was actually kind of looking forward to something like that because the story that would happen and the kind of like mental fortitude that I'd have to pull out of myself to be able to last in that type of circumstance, which would have just also increased my marketability, right, as a human, but also just my skill set as well. So yeah, I wasn't too flustered by it. It was a mandatory checkpoint where I didn't have my passport on me, and there's a little bit more to the story if you want me to go there, but yeah, that was.
Well, yeah, go there. We're here.
Okay, so they came back out. It was probably like an hour and 15 minutes. We were sitting there and said, "Hey, we're going to take you down to the main station. We're going to escort you there." So there was a car behind us, car in front of us, escorted us into the main city called Makhachkala. It's such a weird pronunciation, but it's a city in Dagestan. It's one of the biggest cities in Dagestan. And we went to the station, and we were sitting there for like 30 minutes. They're not saying anything to us. And then they said, "Okay, it's time for you to get your picture." So they had me do a mugshot, and they told us we couldn't have our phones in there at all. And I knew I wanted a picture of me getting the picture taken, and my buddy still had his phone. I look at him, I'm like, get your phone out, because there was only one guy in the room with us, and he was already doing it. So I'm there getting my picture taken. I can show you guys the picture afterward. Yeah. I have this like black hat. It's a sick mugshot. And you can see he took a picture of me getting my mugshot. So we did that, got my fingerprints, everything. That got taken in for questioning. And they're literally asking me every question under the sun. They're like, what's your parents' names? What's your address in the US? What'd you go to school for? You know, I'm like 8 years out of school, right? They're asking me questions about that. Just the most intimate questions. Eventually I was like, why are you asking me this? They didn't speak any English, but my friend was translating. He wants to know, he wants to know why you guys are asking me these questions. It doesn't make any sense. And like, just answer. I was like, okay. And hopefully none of them are listening to this podcast, but I didn't always give the most honest answer. Got to say whatever I want.
We're big in Dagestan.
Yeah, we have a huge following.
Primary demographic. Yeah. So did questioning for literally probably 45 minutes. And then eventually they're like, okay, just make sure you have your passport next time. We're not going to charge you or anything, and you're free to go. And I was like, hold on, one more thing. And I was like, okay, translate this for me. I was like, ask them if they'll take a picture of me, like the police officers. And he asked them, and they're like, no, we don't do that. No. I look at one of them, I'm like, come on, just one. And he kind of gets a little smirk on his face, and he goes, Okay. Хорошо. Хорошо is like, okay, good in Russian. And I look at the other guy, and I'm like, and he's like, okay. So we walk outside. I get a picture. I can show you guys a picture too with these guys. They're kind of like got a little smirk on their face. It's a great photo.
That's great.
And then I left and continued with my life.
We need that when we do the promo for this
Yeah.
episode. We want that picture.
All right, I'm going to switch.
Oh, yeah, I'll share it with you.
I'm going to switch gears because we did talk a little bit about this before the show.
Yes.
How intimidated are women when you go to date them with this? Like, you have a lot. I mean,
It's so crazy.
You're
Yes,
a total like different level from most guys your age. Like, how does that work? How does that? You talked about relationship dynamics. We were talking before. How does it work?
It scares the hell out of them. Yeah, because especially today, women have become so independent and autonomous, and they're already emotionally generally more superior than men, but they've become even more smart emotionally. Like now, men should be paying attention to emotional intelligence and learning as much as they can about it, but women in particular are like all in on it now more than they're already more emotionally intelligent than men. And so they're used to men that are operating a very like fast up-tempo frequency where the women are generally much slower and more centered.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're used to being in control because dudes are just so all over the place now. And so when they get in that space with me, it's a shock to their system because now they're really in their head. They're used to being like, okay, this guy, it's all happening subconsciously, right? This guy's a little out of control. I'm in control here. I'm running the show. I determine what happens and how this goes. But with me, it's not the case. They can't read me. They can't emotionally find ways to be able to manipulate me because I'm like this emotionally. And so it scares some of them. Some will be willing to be vulnerable enough to share it with me that they feel like they're really in their head and they're really uncomfortable. Like, okay, great. Thank you. And then it ends up being a great interaction, but others will like get out of eject themselves because of discomfort, because a lot of women feel more safe being in positions where they can control the man in the dynamic. So they'll intentionally leave the space, but I get a little bit of both, but I get a kick out of it and have fun.
Well, it's interesting, and there may be something that is generational or just about the difference in ages, if not the generations, right? So you've mentioned two possible outcomes, right? One, women eject and get away from it because it doesn't suit them. Another is it confuses them and they don't know how to react. A third thing, and we hear this certainly at our age, is that women like that, a man who is in control of himself, because it gives them the security to be their best feminine selves. They can lean into the security that provides. So I'm curious, have you found that with 30-something or 20-something women that you've dated, that there are women who will lean into that? Or is that something that maybe you haven't experienced because it comes to women appreciating that as they age?
Yeah. So first off, a lot of women will say that, but then when they actually meet that guy, they don't have the ability, they fumble the bag. That happens a lot. And I know because I have a lot of friends that are just like me and they'll experience the same thing. Like girls will say, oh, I want a man that's like so intentional about who he is, knows what he wants, knows the direction that he's going. But what they don't realize is that a man that's like that isn't going to be tolerant of a lot of the riffraff manipulative behavior that women will naturally do. And I'm not even saying from a bad point of view, like it's just women are programmed to do that to men. They call it shit tests. So they subconsciously see if the guy really is who he says he is. It's just how women are. And they can self-implode in those moments when they realize that they're not in control and they're so used to being in control. What their brain says they want and what's happening internally, all of the conflict, it like is such like this. And so they'll literally eject themselves from a situation or fumble the bag with the guy or they'll try to treat the guy like the other guys that they're used to dealing with. And a dude that's in his power, like doesn't tolerate that type of behavior. Like flakiness, shadiness, like playing like little games, like he sees all of it. So he's like, okay, then goodbye. So some women are adapt to it. They've done certain levels of work. Normally in the late 20s, early 30s, they're more likely to be they understand themselves more, to know what's happening, to be able to communicate it. Like one girl I'm seeing right now, she's like very good at it. She's deep in she has a house, like a spiritual house. She's like, she teaches people stuff and she's very in tune with herself. So she like is aware of all these things happening. It's really interesting for me to see it real time because this is one of the first girls that's like articulated it so well and is so willing to, because she knows herself so well, to explain what's happening, what's going on inside of her. And she's like, it feels like it's like the most dangerous thing in the world, but I've never felt more connected to myself and more alive. And it feels like I want to just blow the whole thing up. But I know that that's the part of me that's just scared to not be in control.
Yeah, I think a lot of the people that you deal with your age probably haven't dealt with some of the trauma from their past or trauma from their childhood or all that. Like
Yes.
what we deal with, I mean, is a lot of people that have dealt with that at this point. They've taken care of some of that trauma and they've healed from it, or we're trying to talk to people about trying to heal that trauma. But in your age group, I got to imagine that they haven't quite worked through all that yet.
Yeah, it depends. Generally, the people that I surround myself with, they have, and then the people that come to me, I help them do that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I wouldn't even say the older generations of people generally do that. I think they're generally a little bit more resistant, but I think you guys are anomalies.
Well, that's why we're doing the show, because we're trying to exactly why the show exists, because there's nothing like it.
To tap into a demographic of people that are generally very adverse to this type of work, right? Which is amazing that you guys are doing that. And I think it's so cool. So
yeah, we'll have to have you on more, because I think that there's so much that you can add, because we talked a lot about your generation, your age, and front nine. And we've talked a lot about that too, is how important it is now to take what we're saying and learn from our mistakes and make that front nine even better than we did. Right. Yes. So that's kind of why we really wanted to have you on today, but maybe more so we can get into next time how you really do transform people on the back nine. Your 74-year-old examples of like 50 somethings you've worked with and things like that, and how you've transformed them.
And it leads to another question too, as we start to wrap up here, which is, I'm curious to know from your perspective, what you think the future of this kind of coaching is going to be over the next 5, 10, 20 years to your generation. And what do you think the role is that we as middle-aged guys can play as mentors to that generation?
Well, I think as far as fathers go, being able to encourage your kid to go deeper into himself and understanding himself more based off the different circumstances and life events that have happened, I think is one of the most incredible things that a dad and father can do for his son. And creating a space where he feels safe enough to do that. I think that's one of the biggest things that a father can do for his son, is creating a safe enough space for him to explore the world in a way where he can be curious about things and feel safe enough to take the time to learn enough to be able to be successful at whatever it is that he feels inspired to do.
Would you feel the same about fathers for daughters? We're both girl dads.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
No, I would. Yeah. I'm going to speak. I'm going to speak.
Please,
I'm going to speak and say yes, absolutely. Like, I know that that's what I did for my daughters. I made them curious. I showed them things that a lot of people would have been sheltered their kids and not shown them. And I can tell you that my two daughters are the way they are, not just because of me, but because I opened the door for them to explore a lot of different things. My oldest one's a dancer, and I never wanted her to give up her dream. And yeah, my younger one's in law school, and they just literally followed their dreams. And so it is exactly that. Could I have done better? Of course. Every parent thinks they could have done better. But I think what you said about what fathers should do to their sons absolutely fits for daughters. 100%.
I believe it.
Cool. Well, hey, Keyen, it is fantastic to get to know you. We really appreciate your spending some time with us and sharing your perspective. What you've accomplished already is phenomenal. And we look forward to keeping in touch with you and having you come back on the show at some point.
Yeah. Thank you guys for having me. This is amazing. And it's so cool to see that you guys have done the work that you've done just on yourselves, but then are also so excited to share it with other people and to get a targeted demographic of people that are generally not catered to. Cause I can imagine it's like guys like you that are dudes that are going after what they want, operate at really high levels, and maybe feel like they don't have the space or time to work on this stuff. I'm not saying you guys don't, but just that general demographic, that people that are like you, that's what makes you guys so different, is being those high achieving guys that go after what you want, but also willing to do the work. And so it's so cool to see that and to be part of this experience with you guys and to provide some value to your audience. Thanks for having me.
That means a lot hearing that from you. Thank you so much.
Appreciate
Thanks.
So, I mean, what an impressive guy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it's so neat to see somebody be in that position at his age. There's such a remarkable maturity. I mean, it took us 20 plus more years to be able to do that.
Yeah, and I think one of the things, thanks. We can't look at each other in our sunglasses anymore.
We're not as cool as he is.
We're not as cool as he is. We got to move on from that. I think the biology of belief is an incredible thing. I've got to go find that book, but then that Keyen took that into his practice and into what he teaches other people. I think it is internal. Like, you really do. It's funny because I know when I came up with, after my divorce, when I came up with Start It Yes, when that became my mantra, I realized that had been in me since I was little. There was something about it. There was something about Start It Yes that had always been in me, and my divorce triggered it. I was a no first. Why I can't do this? I can't do this. I can't do this. But there are things in my life that were enough started, yes, that I realized that it wasn't like it's my full mantra now, but it existed from the time I was very little, but I just had too many blocks for it.
Yeah, stuff gets in the way, right? I mean, our various experiences, our traumas, all of those things. And so much of the part of maturing, of aging, is shedding those blocks, shedding those experiences, processing them in a healthy way to allow us to get back to that, our spiritual selves, getting in that alignment. I felt that too. Just the other day, a few weeks ago now, I was running in a turkey trot, and within the first eighth of a mile, back then I was working on a hip flexor injury, and I felt it twinge a little bit. And I'm like, okay, this is not going to be that kind of a race. But I looked around. It was a beautiful morning. It was 50 degrees. There was not a cloud in the sky. It was so cold for Florida, right? And I just took a moment to say, no matter how this turns out, I may be limping across the finish line. What a beautiful day this is. That's what spoke to my soul, right? That's where I could appreciate that. That's where I felt the spirituality. And it's amazing that, because I don't think I could have done that 5 years ago, much less 10 or 20 or 30. I would have been caught up in that, in whatever my time was going to be. And that result, to hear someone like Keyen, as young as he is, to have that kind of emotional intelligence is just incredible. And that he's already actively passing that on to other people in his generation and people in generations that are older than he is, our generation, and older than we are.
I think one of the things that's interesting too, and we are over a year into this, I think that there's people, and I think there's people resistant to our show, like our show.
To the idea of our show, to the concept.
I absolutely think friends that I've run into, and they're like, oh, your show's, but it probably does make people uncomfortable. Really, some of the things we talk about on the show. And that really hit home to me when he said that. And I don't think about that a lot. Oh, we're doing something great, and there's people that are going to be interested. But deep down, there's a lot of resistance to this. This is why this show doesn't exist anywhere. Because really, there's no show like it, because people resist this. This is putting you in an uncomfortable situation. How did I parent? What did I do wrong? What can I do better? How can I improve myself? All of these things. He's exactly right. Yeah. That's a very uncomfortable space to be in.
It is. But I would encourage people who are listening to this, I hope they're listening to it anyway, who are resisting it, to lean into it. Because that's what we did, right? We did it not because we had a show to do this, but because of our circumstances, our career switches, our divorces, and so to be able to analyze that. And we were fortunate that we were able to support each other and had other support systems that said, go ahead and go after that. Don't distract it. Don't numb yourself. Don't push it away. And so that's what we're trying to do here, right? And so if you are resisting it, totally understood. I did it first. I'm sure you did also. But on the other side of it, man, it's glorious.
It is. And I will say this too. I love that we are starting to talk about the front nine, because as we both have daughters, and I'm going to encourage them to listen to this episode in particular. It's not every episode is for everybody on the front nine and everybody pre-middle age, but this one in particular is, and I think there'll be more of them down the road.
Yeah, well, I like this one a whole heck of a lot. We're going to have Keyen back at some point, and we're going to have another episode for you coming up next week on the Back Nine.